start things off with none other than Chase Brown. He gets a great matchup this week against the Dallas Cowboys, which is why he is my RB3 on the week. His role continues to be an absolutely elite level role. We're talking about like a Christian McCaffrey-esque type of role since week 9, since Zach Moss has left. This man has handled every single snap and every single carry but one since week 9. He's averaging 22.1 fantasy points per game, which trails only Saquon Barkley over that span. He's also 16th in explosive run rate, 21st in yards after contact per attempt. So there is absolutely everything to like with Chase Brown. He is an absolute every week must start, especially with his usage. Now, there is some talk with him that does he lose some of this opportunity as the season winds down, as they're out of the playoffs? I don't think that's going to happen. There's an argument to be made that Zach Taylor is probably coaching for his job right now because obviously it has been pretty much a disaster for the Bengals this year, but we'll see on that. So as long as he can maintain this role, I mean, he can absolutely win you your league this year. And honestly, this starts off again this week with an absolutely electric matchup against the Cowboys. One of the best matchups for all running backs because the Cowboys over their last 4 games have allowed 152 rushing yards per game, a 5.21 yards per carry, which is the highest rate in the league over that span, 11 rushing touchdowns, which is the most over that span. They've also allowed the highest explosive run rate allowed, the 3rd lowest stuff rate, and the 5th highest yards before contact per attempt for running back. So this is a dream matchup for Chase Brown on Monday Night Football. Absolutely starting with confidence. He is my RB3 on the week. Thought about putting him even just a little bit higher, but Chase Brown is an absolute slam dunk this week against the Cowboys. Next up, speaking of crazy workloads, we're going to talk about Alvin Kamara, and he gets the Giants this week. Kamara's been pretty similar to Chase Brown in terms of workload, 78% opportunity share, averaging 17.2 carries, 6.6 targets per game, with a 22% target share is absolutely bonkers. He's also 7th in rushing yards, 1st in receiving yards, with 19.6 fantasy points per game. Now, he has been on a bit of a touchdown drought, but some of that can be explained away with Taysom Hill taking away a lot of those opportunities. Sadly, Taysom Hill's out for the year with a knee injury, so we're not going to have to really worry about that this week. So that actually helps Alvin Kamara quite a bit. I think he's a locked-in top 5 running back this week. But all that said, with the amount of work that he's seeing, especially at his advanced age of 29 years old, he is still 9th in explosive run rate, 9th in yards per route run, and top 20 in yards created per touch. So Alvin Kamara has been awesome this year. And if he has scored more touchdowns, maybe on pace with some of these other guys, I mean, he could be right there with Saquon Barkley in terms of fantasy points per game right now. So he should be locked in top 5 running back this week because the Giants have been absolutely booty since week 9. They have allowed the 5th most rushing yards, the 4th most rushing touchdowns, a 9% explosive run rate, which is highest in the league. One of the biggest problems with the Giants has been tackling, as they've allowed the 3rd lowest yards before contact per attempt, but the highest yards after contact per attempt. So basically, they're getting there, they're getting pressure, but they are just not tackling and bringing a running back down. Someone like Alvin Kamara, who has the 9th highest explosive run rate in the league, this is obviously great news for him. Also, with Taysom Hill being out, this is just going to open up the avenue for far more rushing touchdowns for Alvin Kamara. Side note, Kendre Miller is eligible to return from IR. There was some conversations with the head coach talking about he's not in a doghouse like he was with Dennis Allen. So he could see some work here within this offense, but I don't think it's going to be anywhere enough to take away from Alvin Kamara. So Alvin Kamara is in an absolute smash spot this week against the Giants. Speaking of smash spots, I think Devon Achane is also in one of those this week against the Jets. Achane has been one of the best, most reliable fantasy running backs this season outside of the stretch of games when Tua missed. In the 8 healthy games with Tua this year, Achane is the RB2, averaging 21 fantasy points per game. He has been a top 6 scoring running back in 7 of the 8 games played. He's seeing a 16.8% target share, which is only 2nd to Alvin Kamara. And he's also 8th in yards per route run, 8th in yards created per touch, and 13th in missed tackles forced per attempt. So Devon Achane has been seeing this monster workload as a pass catcher. He's still only playing about 60% of the rush attempts on most weeks. But overall, he has just been an absolute cheat code this year because of his involvement in the passing game. He is regularly seeing 6 to 8 targets per game, which is going to make him a force every single week. And then if he finds the end zone, it's like a cherry on top. So that being said, Jets have been a decent run defense this year. We have started to see a little bit of a drop in recent weeks. They have allowed 6 of the 8 total touchdowns over their last 4 games. They've also allowed the 13th most rushing yards. Achane is an easy top 5 play for me again this week. Next up is going to be my guy. This is his third week in a row of being on this. Let's see if we can continue this train with Bucky Irving against the Raiders. He has been on an absolute heater the last month, averaging 19.7 fantasy points per game, and he's done so with pretty limited opportunities. Over that 4-game stretch, he's only played 47% of the snaps, handled 48% of the rush attempts with a 12% target share. Now, we have seen a small shift the last couple of weeks where he's played 54% of the snaps, 52% of the rush attempts with a 14% target share. I do think that Rachaad White is obviously not going anywhere. Rachaad White is going to continue to see, some touches from this backfield. Bucky Irving has been an absolute baller of the last month of the season, and he's been ultra efficient while doing it. He ranks top 5 in almost every efficiency metric that we care about. So Bucky Irving, I think, was going to continue this, and he is another one of these players that can absolutely be a league winner for people. So next up, they get a matchup against the Raiders, who have allowed the 13th most fantasy points to running back. So I just love Bucky Irving. Irving has been phenomenal. And I know we've talked about him a couple times on the show, but we've got it right every single time because he is absolutely smashed. And I don't see any reason this week that he won't continue to do so against the Raiders. So let's move over to our next guy, and that is going to be Tony Pollard against the Jaguars. He continues to see a massive workload, whether Tyjae Spears plays or not. Last week against the Commanders, he handled 72% of the snaps and rush attempts with a 16% target share. Overall, he ranks top 9 in both carries and targets on the season. Even though he's only scored 4 touchdowns, his 15% target share will continue to make him a viable fantasy option no matter the matchup. Now, obviously, last week they got their absolute doors blown off of him by the Commanders, so he didn't see as much work as you typically would see. Now, I will say this week is a great matchup against the Jacksonville Jaguars, as they've allowed the 3rd most rushing yards, the 10th most touchdown, the 4th lowest stuff rate, and the 11th highest yards after contact per attempt. Now, with Trevor Lawrence likely out again due to that concussion he take, Titans are betting favorites right now. And this is a very safe game script for Pollard to see a very solid workload this week. So I love Tony Pollard here within this matchup against the Jaguars. I think he can absolutely smash and be a top 10 running back this week. Next up, let's move over to Isaac Guerendo. Yes, the new fancy toy, the waiver wire ad of the week. With Christian McCaffrey and Jordan Mason both being placed on IR, it opens the door wide open for Isaac Guerendo to come in and steal the shine. It could end up being one of the biggest waiver wire ads of the year this week because as we know, this situation has always been one of the better running back situations to be in, one of the better systems to play in. And so I think Isaac Guerendo could end up being an absolute smash down the stretch of the season. Now, if you're not familiar with Isaac Guerendo, and I understand if you're not, he wasn't necessarily, this huge running back prospect coming out. He had limited workload, in college. But in terms of athleticism, he checks every single box you could look for. This dude is 6 foot, 221 pounds, ran a 4.340 and a 98 percentile burst score. And he has the ability to be an absolute home run hitter. He draws a lot of comparisons to Isiah Pacheco, which makes sense because of that speed that he possesses. And so we really haven't had this huge waiver wire ad that everybody wanted to go add with the running back position this year. It just hasn't happened. We've really kept pretty clean on our running backs, be able to keep them upright and not these guys suffering a lot of injuries this year. It's actually been the wide receivers. So we haven't had really one of these weeks where everybody's running out trying to add these guys. And Isaac Guerendo steps into a situation here where he actually can be, and he gets a phenomenal matchup against the Bears because since week 10, the Bears have allowed the 9th most rushing yards, the 11th highest explosive run rate, the 7th highest yards before contact per attempt, and the 11th most PPR points per game on the season. So while it may seem a little hot to people because we haven't fully seen him in a full game, I think he's a top 12 running back this week, and I think he can absolutely smash in this spot against the Bears. So I really like Isaac Guerendo. I think you can plug him in as a plug-and-play RB1 this week. So absolutely love that spot for him. Next up is going to be Rico Dowdle against the Bengals. We had some rumblings that Rico Dowdle was going to see an expanded role. Well, he finally got it. In week 13, he played 70% of the snaps, 68% of the rush attempts, but only received an 8% target share. Now, it should be noted that the Cowboys pretty much led this game throughout against the Giants. He finished with 123 total yards and he scored for 21.3 fantasy points. But though this really shouldn't come as much of a shock because the only other game that he received as 70% of the snaps, he produced another 21.7 PPR points. So when given opportunity this year, he has produced. I don't know why it's taken him so long for them to finally give him this role. It should have been something he did a long time ago. But regardless of the fact, here we are. And as long as he continues to see this, I do think that he should be a locked-in RB2 rest of season. And now they get Cincinnati this week. Since week 10, the Bengals have allowed a 4.8 yards per carry, which ranks the ninth highest, as well as the sixth highest explosive run rate allowed, eighth highest touchdown rate, seventh highest missed tackles forced per attempt, and the 13th highest yards after contact per attempt. I think Dowdle should be viewed as a top 15 running back this week. I really like this matchup for him. Let's hit on my last running back and we'll get out of here. Last week, Pacheco returned after missing 9 weeks due to injury. He returned and basically split touch with Kareem Hunt and Samaje Perine. Pacheco ended up receiving 7 carries and 1 target, and he turned that into 49 total yards. Obviously, that's nothing great. There was no denying, though, how much better he looked than the other running backs in the backfield. I've been saying this for weeks. I know a lot of people that own Kareem Hunt were really hoping Isiah Pacheco wasn't going to come back to like the playoffs or something like that because he was providing a pretty decent floor in terms of fantasy point production. But if you watch their games, you would see exactly what everybody else was seeing that was watching the Kansas City Chiefs. That Kareem Hunt looked like cheeks. Like he did not look good. He was just getting a massive amount of touches, which was providing the upside for the fantasy points to come. But he was not looking good. He was not explosive. He was just run 3 or 4 yards and then get tackled. He's not explosive anymore. He's not that guy. And so Isiah Pacheco looked far more explosive than Kareem Hunt did. And I do think as the season continues, that they're going to continue to ramp up Isiah Pacheco to get him ready for the playoffs. So I think it's possible this week he sees 12 to 14 touches in this game against the Chargers. And honestly, while on paper, if you just were to go look at the raw fantasy points allowed, it wouldn't look like a great matchup. They have really started to struggle against the run recently as they've allowed the 8th most rushing yards, good for a 4.7 yards per carry. They've also allowed the 8th highest explosive run rate allowed. So I do think this sets up as a really nice spot here for Isiah Pacheco in a home matchup on Sunday Night Football against the Chargers. So lastly, I was telling everybody to sit Isiah Pacheco because I wanted to see what this was going to look like, how he looked. Now I'm a little bit more confident playing him. And honestly, with 6 teams on bye, you're not going to have as many choices to be able to sit somebody like this. So you have Isiah Pacheco. Depending on your other options, I am perfectly okay with plugging him in. I definitely think he definitely could be, even on limited touches because of how explosive he is, somebody that could still be a top 12, top 15 running back this week. So really like Isiah Pacheco.